Howdy, listeners. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you haven't listened to this podcast before, in addition to bringing you informative and entertaining photography and business-related content, I also go on adventures with hashtag Nerdy Photo Crew, the crew of the Starship Fibonacci.
This is real. It's all illusion.
Hey, that guy looked eerily like me. Fib, anything I should be worried about?
No, not at all. Go back to what you were doing.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
I never should have used that box that Tesla gave me. Oh, God. What have I done? You guys sure you don't need my help with this?
Nope. All good.
Move along. Move along.
Okay, on this episode of the podcast, I am talking with a longtime friend of the podcast, Leighton DaCosta, about fictional photographers. Photographers come up all the time in movies, television, comic books, even video games. We talk about our favorites and what it is about depictions of fictional photographers that make real photographers love them and hate them. Check out that discussion after this short break.
Hey, this is Ken M.
Padawan J.
Coach Duffy from the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour podcast. Every week, the ODPH is talking sports, movies, TV, comics, and more. It's always a parlay of topics on each episode. You can find the ODPH on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and wherever you find great podcasts, such as the one you're listening to right now. Don't forget to check out OchoDuroParlayHour.com, where you can find the links to all of the ODPH social media accounts, links to the bands whose music you hear each week on the show, hashtag 607 podcast info, and parlay points, our companion blog section of the show. Thanks for listening to the ODPH. Now get back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am here with frequent guest, but it has been a while, Leighton DaCosta. Leighton, welcome.
Hey, Casey, how's everything going out there?
Oh, we're doing pretty good. We're still surviving the pandemic. And on this episode, we're going to talk about some of our favorite fictional photographers. We just finished, I think this is coming out, maybe in May or late May, maybe June, when this episode actually comes out. But we just finished the March Madness of fictional photographers. And Peter Parker ended up winning. But there are so many fictional photographers. There's some that I forgot. I realized that I forgot to pick up on. But you and I were just talking before we started recording. I don't know if you want to go over your claim one of the photographers not being a photographer.
So on this thing, I think that your final two that you had on there was Peter Parker and Vicky Vale. And I'm one of these people that I do not really consider Vicky Vale to be a photographer. I do consider her to be a journalist and all this other stuff, but I really don't consider her to be a photographer as far as the fictional photographer genre goes about. But like I was telling you, I also, on the other hand, consider Holly Castillo, which didn't even make it to the dance.
Hey, maybe next year. Maybe next year. We're gonna have to cycle people in and out. There's gonna be more.
I think Holly Castillo was in the NIT, the not invited tournament over there, and the fictional photographer Holly Castillo, for those of you who don't know, is from J-Lo in What to Expect When You're Expecting. And if I remember right, because I get a little old right now. The belief is that why I consider her to be more of a photographer than Vicky Vale is not because she's J-Lo.
No, it is because she's J-Lo.
Right? Well, once I learn how to speak Spanish, I'll even get even better watch, right? A-Rod, watch out, right? But the thing about it is this, right? And I went to University of Miami, too, so there you got that. It's because she shot with pro photo lights. And how often do you see in a movie or a commercial or whatever that they actually have a real set of pro photos or something like that?
A real set of lights. Just a real set of lights in general.
Yeah,
it's interesting because at the moment, I'm looking at our post on the Nerdy Photographer blog that I put up before all this started, before the voting started, that has all of the, like, a bunch of different fictional photographers on it. And I've got 3 different frames from different comic books from different eras. And Vicky Vale has got a camera in every single one of them. One's a Canon, one's a Nikon. So, she apparently was switching teams as far as, maybe like Nikon came out with a mirrorless and she was decided, it had dual card slots. So she switched over, but definitely a photographer. As far as like the lighting stuff, like that is one thing I always find in movies and television that just bugs me as a photographer. And I don't know if there are other industries, I'm sure there are, where it just bugs me. Like I was watching this movie. We did an episode on it. The Holiday Calendar, which is like Quincy Jones's son, I think, or grandson. I'm not sure. Like, his boy plays a character in it, and there's like they just don't know. Like, there's like lighting equipment, but it's going off, but there's no trigger, there's no like cord going on, and it's just like, oh, now there's the flash is going off, and like the character who's a photographer is like shooting with like just a pop-up flash. And like the pictures they're showing, I'm like, that is not a pop-up flash. Like, come on, guys. It's just
well, what is the guy named like Terry Richardson? Terry Richardson, took years to develop a look that looked like on-camera flash, that wasn't on-camera flash. So they could have tried to do something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, but this was like so like this movie was so about this character being a photographer. And I was just like, yeah, this is like you're doing, but you did no research. Whoever wrote this, like, just did absolutely no research. And they'd be talking about, like, hey, remember that camera we learned to take pictures on? Because that's exactly how photographers talk. They wouldn't, like, bring up the name of the camera that it was. It's like car guys. Like, you spent, like, 3-4 years, like, building a car and be like, hey, remember that car we built? That was awesome. It was a car.
It was the '56 Chevy there, you know what I mean? It's just like just a car.
It was a car. And another one that I forgot, we're thinking about people that got left out this year, is Dexter. I forgot that Dexter, it's been so long since I've watched that show, I forgot that he was a crime scene photographer.
Yeah, and for a while. So here's the thing: like I never knew the story about Dexter because I've not watched one episode of Dexter. So I mean and it's not because I can't afford HBO. It's just because it was one of those series when I was in Afghanistan. Or is it Showtime? See, that tells you how much I know, right? It was one of those series that went in Afghanistan that everybody else watched, but I knew that he was a crime scene photographer, and I guess that's the whole story behind his. I guess he's also a serial killer. I want to take it,
yes,
or a serial avenger, or something like that. And
yes, he'd kill bad people. That was his whole thing. So he was a serial killer who would kill bad people and usually other serial killers.
And I, at that time I was really full of Walter White at that time, so I had my fill of cheering for the
anti-heroes,
corrupt good guy, or the lovable bad guy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, Dexter, but like, the thing about it is this: you had a couple guys in there that are just going to be fan favorites. You know what I mean? Like you had Jimmy Olsen in there. You had Peter Parker, and Peter Parker. Nobody takes a selfie
like Peter Parker. The guy invented the selfie,
right? With an SLR, not even with a point and shoot or anything like that. Like the dude can take a selfie like the American Sniper. You know what I mean? Because he can be like 5 miles away from the camera and take a selfie with the bomb blast and everything in the background and the Sandman or whatever it is.
Whatever's going on. He's just like, I'm just going to throw a web up here, and he just throws the camera, and it's just like, I don't know what kind of trigger he's using, or he set a timer. He would set a timer so it would just go off.
I think that's what it is. I think it's just the timer. But in the 50s, he had a remote timer or something like that, or whenever it came out that, it would flash several times. I mean, he could bounce a spider web.
Yeah.
And
he was using those spider webs like
a spider can.
Yeah, anything a spider can. And apparently spiders can take great pictures, because it's just like he's like, oh, I'm gonna take a little like the first, kind of the first influencer in a way. He's a guy's getting paid for taking selfies, and he's just like setting
Exactly.
the whole thing up himself. Like, yeah, he's gonna a fan favorite, definitely. Like, and it's hard to beat Peter Parker just because the guy's been around for a long time in the game. It's not like just like any of those like Jimmy Olsen again. Like, how many people have played Jimmy Olsen? Like, there's like a long streak of people, and like it's even gotten like now we've had a female Jimmy Olsen. There's a black Jimmy Olsen on Supergirl. We've got a lot of different people playing these characters, so it might be a little unfair in the sense, to put them up against people who were like just from a movie. Like, but then you think about LB Jeffries. LB Jeffries made it all the way, like, very close to the final. He was in the final
that's
four.
Because y'all, but that's because you're a bunch. I say y'all because I voted for him too. But it's because y'all a bunch of old people, right? It's the same reason why James Woods, like nobody under like freaking
nobody
30.
under 30 voted for James Woods,
right? And so, and to me, is like when you asked me the first time, I said Robert Kincaid, right?
Yeah,
And the thing about Bob Kincaid, the old Bobby boy, right now, the thing about it is that he is the epitome, and I might get in trouble for this, so hopefully old Squint Eastwood doesn't come my way. He is the epitome of what people of the dignified GWC guy with the camera, the guy who uses his photography to flirt, right, or to love interest
to get laid. Let's be honest,
right?
He's using his job as a National Geographic photographer to hook up with this lady who happens to be unhappy in her marriage, and that's just it. This is like 3 day love affair, and it's over. And it's like, yep, see you later. Yeah.
Nothing, but nothing happens in Madison County though. So you got that. That's the whole thing.
Rear Window, what I love about Rear Window, even like so many years later, is just because it is still so realistic as to what a photographer would do. and especially in New York. Like, you're just like, you sit there and you live in New York. I lived in New York for 19 years, almost 20 years. And you start to get to like in a relationship with the people out the window. Like, you just see people in these relationships, and that was, I felt, was so very realistic about that character, and like very, even still to this day, just like you could, that is transplanted to modern times. And as far as equipment goes, he had his equipment was the shit. Like, let's be honest, LB had that like Nikon, wasn't it a Nikon, with his giant telephoto lens, because he was a sports photographer.
Yep.
He was or action, whatever, because didn't he get injured in, it was a motocross or something, like he got hit by a car at like a road rally or something.
The question is, like, not only that, but I think the question is that at those times, like, probably before the 1960s, was product placement really a thing?
No.
Like, did a guy say like, hey, we're going to use Nikon because that's the best Japanese camera that's out there, right? Because Canon really wasn't like that, but or we're going to use Minolta, or we're going to use like Rolleiflex or whatever, what I mean? Like, and just to segue from that, let me ask you a question. What's the guy's name? I want to say, is it Jerry? Mel Gibson's character in Julie Roberts. You see, like, where he's stalking her.
Oh,
and
the net, not the net. Pelican Brief.
Conspiracy theory.
It was a conspiracy theory. I was going through my list of them. That was Sandra Bullock, and then it was something else. Yeah, whatever. Yes, two Sandra Bullock movies.
Yeah, because Julie Roberts and Captain Picard, and he bites the nose off.
Yep.
Right. So would that could be considered would he be considered in that photographer realm because he was stalking her and actually was using like real equipment? And and speaking of Captain Picard, how come there's no fictional photographers of the future?
Because you don't see them. You don't see, like, well, does he use? I mean, they take pictures in Star Trek? Like I've never seen anybody take photos.
I mean, they got binoculars.
Yeah, but they don't. But I never see them like capture an image. Like it's all because they got the holodeck and stuff. It's like we're just gonna capture a hologram or whatever. But yeah, that begs the question because like also you have to think of Saw, the guy in Saw, who was the photographer, who was taking pictures of people, and then like gets caught in his like dark room, his
Yeah.
in his apartment that he had. Like he gets caught by Jigsaw.
Let me see what that is. Saw movie photographer. There we go. Let's see. As I got my
yeah, we're pulling up our IMDb or
my sources. Yeah,
I'm trying to
Adams. What you go? Adams Danite. He's in the bathtub. Okay, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So here's a I'm not gonna mention her name, right? But a past acquaintance of mine is actually been in not just one but two Saw movies.
Really?
Ex-girlfriend for like 20 years ago. But it was like actually two Saw movies, and that was the thing because nobody lives in Saw to
be in the next movie. But there was a couple there where they kind of had overlap of characters, like you just saw the characters from the previous movie or the ones that are going to be in the next movie. So yeah, I guess.
But now we got this new Saw. I guess it's not a Saw. What is it called? Spiral.
Yes,
it's coming out with
Chris Rock.
Chris Rock.
And is it Samuel L. Jackson?
Samuel L. Jackson, and I don't know if it's so like it's hard for me to look at Chris Rock as a serious movie. And so
you didn't see him in Fargo? Like he just did
No,
that?
I have not watched. I have not seen Fargo as yet. I have not seen Fargo as yet.
The TV show, yeah. He was the last season of Fargo he was in. He was really good. It was like much more serious. Yeah.
Is he better at a serious role than Eddie Murphy is, like in Mr. Church or whatever it is? Because Mr. Church was actually pretty good.
I don't know if Eddie Murphy like that's it's tough. Like Chris Rock's good; he's very good in this, but it's like Eddie Murphy. He can do like I don't know. I love Eddie Murphy. But your question about conspiracy theory has me on a different going in a different direction. Because where we then start to think of people who are not necessarily traditional photographers, then we have Goose from our favorite movie, Top Gun. Goose is a photographer. He is like, he took a great picture. It's a Polaroid, even though it's a Polaroid. Andy Warhol used Polaroids. I mean, do we consider Goose a photographer?
Yeah, and I think if you had counted Goose as a photographer, I think Goose might have beat out Peter Parker.
It's possible. I mean, he might have beat it just because that was who I would have been voting for.
Because Goose can play a piano.
Yes, also true. But he can't bail out, man.
Well, that's because he had an awful wingman.
Terrible.
So as a matter of fact, so as you know, like I do a various other things besides photography, right?
Yes.
And so I work with a guy right now who used to be the CEO of Top Gun, pretty much.
Really?
And it's so funny because we reminisce on story, and he's a good. I think he's probably almost 70 years old. 70-ish, somewhere around there. And we joke about him like not buying green bananas. But the thing about it is that we talk about I forgot his name. So here this is where we're gonna get to. Black guy in Top Gun and not Clarence Gilliard.
What? Not Clarence Gilliard. Oh, now you've got me stumped.
There's two black guys in Top Gun.
Yes.
Not Marcus Williams, Clarence Gilliard. But this second guy, the real guy, is actually he is actually a real F-14 Top Gun pilot. He was an instructor, and he is the only guy that is in the movie that was actually, or he's one of two guys that was in the movie that was actually a real pilot.
Wow.
From in the original thing. So it's like we learn about all this stuff, like so all this back end stuff, and I look forward to this new Top Gun coming out. because we learned all this stuff from these guys, because he was there when they were shooting the first Top Gun. So it's like I get all these backstories every day. So
Yeah, it's well, and then that's Caroline and I don't know if I told you, Caroline and I went and saw a screening of it on the deck of the Intrepid in New York, and the Rio guy, who was one of the technical advisors, like gave a question and answer and like a little talk, after or before the screening of the movie. It was a lot of fun. It was some great, fun, interesting stories. Where'd who go? That was, I think, actually one of his real stories that they used in the movie.
yeah,
But we
I'm trying to think.
digress.
We start talking about flying, and especially after this Lego.
Oh yeah, the Lego.
Yeah, with the Lego photographer. But I'm trying. Man, this is was getting me because I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out and remember and let you know who it was, because he's actually a pretty cool guy, and I can't even remember his call sign right now. So
in using Goose though, as somebody who just like shot with Polaroids, though, it plays into, there are other characters who not traditionally, like, their photography is not their job, but you've got like Leonard from Memento, who shoots everything with Polaroids because he has no memory. He can't remember anything.
Well,
so.
It's funny that you still got Polaroid and Fuji's out right now, though. The Fuji Fun cameras and stuff.
Yeah, those Instax. The Instax cameras.
Exactly, and they're still popular, and even with models and stuff like that, they still call them Polaroids these days.
Yeah.
Or they call them digitals, but a lot of people still call them Polaroids. So
yeah, I mean, it's like, the need for Polaroids at this point, like it prints. People just want like a something physical to hold on to. Now, I actually got a lot of like flack for including this guy in the Austin Powers, and I'm not sure why, because
I count him. I counted him. He was one of those guys. I was like, you know what? I forgot about him, but yeah, I count him.
Yeah, even though he's a spy, like that was his job, and he was a fashion photographer, and that was, and you think about it, it was for the time period in which it was set. Even like when now, even it would still be a great cover for a spy, traveling all over the place and going on these photo shoots, and he used the camera not only in like his role as a photographer for his like fashion stuff, but also as a spy. He was like, using a giant telephoto lens. It's like, like he's got like a 600 millimeter, lens on his camera, like taking pictures of people that he's spying on.
Well, who you did not put in there, speaking of, you didn't put Magnum PI.
Magnum, damn it.
That
is criminal. If my mother was still alive, she'd give me hell for that. Yeah, that was I'm putting them on the list for next year. Got to go on the list.
So so like I said, it's amazing how when we're looking at these fictional photographers, how we sometimes take the role of photography for granted, and a lot of these fictional photographers, they're all purpose driven. Whether they're a sports photographer, whether they're a newspaper photographer, whether like I said, even go to Holly Castillo. She was, I think she was doing newborn baby or family photography.
Newborn babies and families, I remember.
Right, and so there's purposes for the cameras to be out there, and even in 2021, I think we were in.
Yeah, that is correct.
Even though you don't see too much intentional use of cell phones in movies and other entertainment mediums when it comes to the art of photography.
Right.
You still don't see that yet. And, usually when somebody's using their cell phone, it's because they're recording somebody You know what I
They're
mean?
shooting video. They're shooting video
Exactly.
and saying like, "Oh, I'm recording you. I'm recording you." That is generally. It's not like I'm taking a picture of this, and that's the thing. That's like like that sort of even with spy movies. It's like remember like and I'm thinking again of Austin Powers when he's like taking pictures of like he finds the documents. He's got that tiny itty bitty camera. He's just like his little spy camera, but it's like it actually looks like a camera. It's not like the traditional spy camera that was just like a little box that they would, like just press a button on and take pictures. Like it's actually like a miniature tiny camera that he's taking pictures with. Like, what's the point of that now? You have your phone. You can just take pictures with anything. Like you have anything like with your phone, and nobody's going to think, oh, he's carrying a camera around.
Well, I tell you what, this new I started looking at I think it's the Galaxy S21 or something like that, Super S21. And I'm not a fan of so I still have like a Galaxy Note 9, which, works perfectly fine for me. I've had it for like 2 or 3 years. But this new one out there has 8K video. And,
Wow.
but you look at this video, but the one thing that, and I was looking at even at a drone that's 8K video. And I think that what people lose sight of is that the still from an 8K is, I think it's like about equivalent to about 36 megapixels.
Yeah.
Right. And
you're pulling frames from stuff, and like you can just pull frames and
while the creativity, and I hate to say this because like everybody always says like, oh, it's still you got to have the skill and everything else like that. I'm like, yes, you're right. But for those that don't have it, they make Glocks over 6-shooters. You know what I mean? So
Right.
It's like, one of them's going to like you just got more chances to be more successful. That's really what it comes down to. And there is a lot of things like where I stress this to guys these days that it's not so much about the dark room. It's not so much about the
processing,
the creation of the process and the creation and everything like that. The talent or skill, and this is where I get back between skill and talent. Skill, you have to have knowledge.
Right.
Talent
just comes.
You have to. It just comes, right? There's a joke. I was listening to one of my podcasts the other day, and they were talking about LeBron James, and they were saying that how the baby that came after him got nothing, right? Like
he had taken everything.
Like God gave LeBron James everything but a hairline, right? and so and there's that talent, and when you start talking about skill, like you got guys like Steph Curry or guys like the Harlem Globetrotters, right? That
People just work at it over and over and over. You can tell.
Lemon and all those guys. You're right. That's skill, but they're not playing in the NBA. You know what I'm saying? They're not going out there and running up and down. You got guys that play football that can do they can throw a 90-yard pass through a freaking 2-foot hole.
Yeah.
Right. But they don't have any rings, and so and I think there's a combination of both. So I think now you have a lot of guys, and what iPhone photography specifically, when Apple went and did their whole shot with an iPhone campaign.
Yeah.
Coupled with Instagram and other places now, other mediums, it's about not getting it right in camera.
It's about processing it afterwards.
But it's getting right in, and I call this getting right in delivery.
Mm.
And I think where we have to get back to is, and it always goes back to Peter Parker. How much are you gonna pay for this picture, right? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
like
how much can I make
$5 for 20, right? And it's like, well, what really mattered was what is the content? What can I do with this image? And so I think that now where we're at is that more, the art form of photography is, and you probably talked to guys already about the NFT thing, but
no, we haven't. You want to come on and talk about that? We'll do another episode on NFTs.
Yeah, but the thing about it is that, and full disclosure, right? I am looking at a way of not just monetizing NFT because I'm not Beeple, so I hate to tell you that I'm just LD, right? But the using the NFTs to better serve your customers and your clients. and I think that is one of those things because like it's very intriguing. The
Yes.
whole concept of royalties and post royalties, and I think that's one of the things that is going to become more and more popular. It may take 5, 10, 20 years, and it may not be exactly what we see right now, where it's you're using certain cryptocurrencies or whatever. But for you to sell an image, and when that image is resold down the line, and for you to still be able to get a royalty from that image,
Right.
from the authenticity of the image,
Yes.
is a very powerful thing as an artist,
It's
and
a
as
very real thing because it's something that since digital it's been something that photographers and visual artists have fought with over and over because we're constantly thinking about what's to keep people from just making a copy of this and selling it or doing whatever they want with it. Yeah, like having that sort of trail is and you know what, that might be some way something to like not only address in a future episode, but like something that it makes me think about how we were talking about fictional photographers. How is this going to affect the characters that we see in the future that are photographers or visual artists? Like there's just like this entire thread of things that you were talking about, both from cameras to NFTs. It changes the lifestyle, and quite often we see things like in horror movies where are set now in the 80s or early 90s in times before cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
We're commonly like if so that we're not thinking like, well, if they had cell phones, this would be over in 5 minutes. I also think of like these photographers. A lot of the times when we're seeing photographers, we're seeing people who are using technology that is older. Where things are set either further in the past, or you're seeing people who are usually like, my take on things, you see like people, oh, somebody's a photographer. If they're not thinking about it, it's just like, oh, they've got a camera. It doesn't matter what they've got. Like we're not really thinking about it, whatever. But if they've thought about it in some way and it's really integral to the character, from my personal experience watching movies, it's like they usually have a film camera.
Right.
they try to make them artsy because they're shooting film instead of digital.
Like it makes it more. It's just like it makes it more authentic. Like it's like, and the thing about it is that the guy that really shoots film is like, oh my gosh, like I can hear that shutter dragging, and he's probably using like obviously I would use an 800 speed film on that guy right now. I can hear him just like he's only using like a 160. I know that's a 160 portrait. I know that, right? And it's there's a movie, isn't there a movie Ectochrome or something like that came out not too long ago?
Kodachrome. There's Ectochrome. There's no, you're talking about Kodachrome with the last roll of Kodachrome. You talking about? Yes.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there like it's funny because we're getting past the point. Because I think all of us are critical when we look at photographers in general in movies and TV shows, and we look at, you can tell the product placement because now I'm starting to see more and more Sonys, in like just regular movies and stuff like that. You can see I remember one time, I forgot what movie I was watching. It was a movie or a TV show I was watching, and it had a fong dong on one of the flashes, right? And
that was
shout out to Gary.
Yeah, there's Gary Fong. Give it up. Pour some out for Gary Fong. It's well, my guess on there is that could be something like if it was an extra, it was somebody, or was it an extra or a main character? Because if it's an extra, they might just be there to get set up. Because
exactly,
I used to get calls for stuff when I was acting, like oh, if you got camera equipment, then you can play a photographer in our red carpet scene as an extra or whatever. Like they just want people to like bring their own stuff because that way that's when
in Charleston they did that. What's the movie? It's a Stephen King, I think, series. I think it has John Goodman in it, and it takes place like in the 60s or 70s or 80s somewhere. It's a timepiece type thing.
Oh, it's the 1961. What, the guy who travels back in time to save Kennedy? It's James Franco. Is that one you're talking about?
I don't know. No, it's hold on, gotta go. If only I had the technology. It's not gems. It was Stephen King. How about this? Charleston, South Carolina. Let's see, because it's specifically this Mr. Mercedes. There we go, Mr. Mercedes. And they would ask for questions like that.
That's Brendan. That's not John Goodman. That's Brendan. Oh gosh, he was in Indiana Jones and in Bruges and man, his name is Brendan. Now it's got
Brendan Gleeson.
Yes,
you're right, Brendan Gleeson. The what? Because John, there was some. They do so many dang things over there, but they were like, that's what they would ask, like, hey, if you got like a 19 something, like, you know, Ford or car,
right?
Or whatever.
If you have the car, if you have like the whatever camera equipment, like all that stuff, like
if you have a FM3 or something, and they would specifically ask for like weird, like, if you have a 1960s to 1970s, and me, I'll probably show up with my Nikon DF and like, okay, nobody will be able to tell the difference, right? You know, but you can tell, and we judge these guys in to see if they're authentic and real. But we're the only one that judge them. Right. Only photographer. It's just like this,
dude.
My wife is she's in the medical field, and we'll watch shows like Nip Tuck or Grey's Anatomy or whatever, and I'll always look at her as like, are they doing it right? Are they doing it right? Are they doing it right? You know, it's like, yeah, we'd never do that. You know, so.
It's like, well, and the thing was that got me is like another one of the characters, like Sean Penn's character, Sean O'Connell in Secret Life of Walter Mitty, the guy who's like out, like he's like this mythic creature, and like, you know, they show these, like, he's like shooting film, but he's shooting with these like modern lenses on like old camera bodies. He's got like that old Fuji like film camera, like, you know, like that he's got like a modern like Fuji lens, like again like a 600 millimeter telephoto lens that's like brand new. So you know that they actually got Fuji to like donate that for the movie. He's got like somehow hooked up to his film camera. But those are the things that we look for, and like I'm planning to do some like more commentary on all of these Hallmark Channel movies that always have photography, like the characters as photographers. I don't know why these writers think that like that's such an easy character to write, but like I watched a bunch during the pandemic, and they just drove me insane. Like it's exactly what you're talking about, like judging what they do. Like I saw so many of them, like that is not right. That is just not right. Like, you know, wedding photographers, especially, it was just like, no, you're not going to just leave the wedding in the middle of the wedding because you need to change your memory card. Like, that's not what you do.
No, like what you do when everybody knows that when your memory card is full in the wedding, just act like you're shooting.
You're still pressing.
Don't do that.
You're just pressing the shutter. Oh, I did that.
The most important part of being a professional photographer is looking like a professional photographer.
Yeah, I mean, I think I honestly have been guilty at times, like early on in my career when I was shooting film, I was guilty at times of like getting to the end of the roll, and like before the people I was shooting did not realize I had finished the roll, and I gotta wind this, and they would just like keep doing their thing, and I was nervous, and I'd be like, I'm still pretending to take pictures. Yeah, I'm guilty of that. Definitely guilty of that.
No, when your battery's dead, it's like, oh, I got to make it back to my. Speaking of, didn't you have a guy from the Full Metal? I don't think it was Joker. Whoever the photographer was in the Full Metal Jacket.
Rafterman.
Yeah,
because like, Joker is technically a photographer too. Like in my opinion, I would think Joker as a photographer, but apparently he phased out of photography and became, you know, he's a correspondent, though he carries a camera with him as well in the
right.
Like Rafterman. Yeah, he was the guy. The guy
because Joker's the one that got his camera stolen, though, right? Or was it Rafterman that got his camera?
Oh, no. Rafterman got his stolen. Because he's got like 3 cameras on him. He's got like 3 cameras, right. And one of them gets stolen.
Then Joker did the kung fu after the camera got stolen.
Yeah. But that even reminds me because they're always like walking around with like 8 cameras on, of like Dennis Hopper in Apocalypse Now, when they like show up at Colonel Kurtz's, compound, and he's like, "I'm an American photojournalist. I'm an American photojournalist." He's got like 6 cameras on him, and you're just like, you're not taking pictures of anything.
So I would tell you this though. Speaking of Joker and the guys from Full Metal Jacket, like that is one of the jobs that I always wanted to do, or like when I was in the military. But it was like number 3 on the coolest jobs in the military when I was in the Navy. And I was fortunate enough, I think, to be able to do number 1 and 2, right? Which was able to fly and shoot missiles, right?
Yeah,
so
those are pretty cool jobs,
right? But number 3 would have been a combat photographer, and those guys, the guys that I've met that are combat photographers, I mean, like those guys are gutsy. I mean, like they, not only just do they get the story, their mind, it's like Neo in the Matrix, and for them to be able to go in combat zones with a gun on them and choose to shoot
take
the
pictures.
Nikon or the Canon or whatever, right? It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I used to work for a guy who was a combat photographer in the Army in Vietnam. And just watching like his technical ability was incredible. Like just like he could just like size something up just like immediately with just looking at it. Like he was like not a creative photographer in a lot of ways, but like very just like his technical skill was just like blew my mind. But that's like, he was doing this. He's not like he could light meter the shot, when he's like, under fire. I think that's just pretty incredible. And actually, I was just on Reddit today, and I was asking people for like interesting stories on the Nerdy Photographer subreddit. Quick plug.
It's called the black hole of photography right there.
This guy was like actually said, I had the opportunity to do a night drop, like from a helicopter, like the rope drop, like a fast descent. And he was like, "Yeah, I was nervous." He's like, "But I did it with my rifle and my 2 DSLRs." And I was just like, and he's like, "I felt so proud of myself afterwards."
I don't like helicopters to begin with, and fast roping is not something that I would want to really, really do. I mean, it looks cool.
Yeah,
it looks cool. I mean, it's just like when they would do one of the things that we did at practice, like once a year, they I don't know if I can use the term teabag, but once a year they put you in the middle of the bay or middle of the ocean, and they get the rescue swimmer to come down while you're in the water to rope you up, pick you up, and then drop you back in, and then the boat comes picks you back up, right? And I was like, I never was a fan of that. It's just like helicopters, semi trucks, and motorcycles. Those are 3 things that when they crash, they're never graceful.
Nope.
And that's what. Even though I like motorcycles and semi trucks, and if I have to fly in a helicopter, I will. But yeah, it's one of those things. So
yeah, it's like, but he was like, "Oh, and I'm sure a lot of other people do it, and whatever." And he's like, "Yeah, probably more graceful than me." And I was just like, he's like, "But I felt pretty good about myself." And I just replied like, "Dude, not a lot of people do that. That is not a large percentage of people who like fast descent from a helicopter from 50 feet, especially with cameras on them. Like that's not
and that's your day at work,
right? Right." And he was like, "Yeah, it's a pretty cool job, man." And I was like, "It sounds like it. Yeah, it sounds pretty awesome, but it's like don't sell yourself short," because he was just kept going like, "Yeah, a lot of guys in the military do that," and I'm like, in the military, but not in real life. Like not in the rest of the world. There's not a lot of people who are fast descending from helicopters. So, give yourself a break. That is actually a pretty impressive thing.
Yep.
And
sorry, I was looking at. I was reading an April Fool's because today is as we're recording this.
We're recording this on April Fool's Day.
You're right. Somebody had made a comment on LinkedIn. So, like, instead of being on Reddit, I go on LinkedIn and see certain things, right? And this is credit to Adam Karpyak. I hope I said that right. He's a recruiter. And he says, I don't know why companies put so much thought into April Fool's jokes. They already have a careers page that tricks people into thinking they have a chance at being considered. So
That's the cruelest joke of all.
well played, Adam. Well played.
And
So,
speaking of combat photographers, I think there's a lot of like people on like the list from both March Madness, the thing, and like on something like people who were combat photographers, photojournalists, whatever. But one of the characters, Mike Kovac, man with the camera, was a combat photographer, comes back to New York City. Like it's young Charlie Bronson, doing the dangerous jobs. Like that most often we think of we get the combat photographers represented in movies. Like it's the conflict itself that's going on, that's driving the action. Like that show, I've seen reruns of it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Like he's it's a fun character.
It's like I said, it's one of those things where I think the problem I shouldn't say the problem. I think one of the challenges when we're looking to Madness for the combat photographer roles in these movies is that those guys really didn't play some of them did play a significant role in the movie, but though their combat photography didn't play a significant role in the movie. And so when you start looking at, like, we go back to Jimmy Olsen and Peter Parker and a couple of even Kincaid and a couple of these other guys, right? It's them being a photographer was significant in the role that they played. And so, but it's funny that now that we're in the MCU and 47 movies in, how Peter Parker is more of just a student.
Right.
And
they haven't even like that the MCU has not even touched on, the photography part of that character.
Exactly. Like he is now just a future Tony Stark.
Right. Whereas back even when it was, Tobey Maguire and even Andrew Garfield, had the camera, like he was taking pictures. But Tobey Maguire,
Tom Holland, the Tom Holland guy he's not that kind of Peter Parker.
Yeah. And he's more of the uber nerd scientist.
So
Peter Parker.
Speaking of, have you seen the teaser for the new Spiderman movie coming out? It's I think yes, is it Far From Home? No, Return. Spider-Man 3. Hold on.
The third one is No Way Home, I think.
No Way Home. So if you see the teaser, and this was at the end of WandaVision, they had a teaser for where it shows Tom Holland and is it Zendaya? Is that the right? And the guy that plays his other friend.
Yeah.
When they're leaving the director's office, and the joke is that they won't tell Tom Holland
anything
what the name of the movie is because he tends to spill it. But then you see the whiteboard that says No Way Home. When you get a chance, freeze in on the screenshot and see all the other names that were up there. It is absolutely hilarious. Like, even Spider-Man 3, like Home Alone, they're like copyright infringement. It's like, it's like, or Close to Home, and it's like, how do we get there? It's just they're really, really funny on there.
I think there's, but when I come to there's one other fictional photographer I want to touch base on, like kind of before we wrap things up, because you brought up an interesting point of how people's that photography is sort of secondary to a lot of these characters. Like we're not like seeing their photos, whereas like a Peter Parker character, like it's so ingrained in his character, at least up until the Tom Holland era. He's taking pictures of himself. That was his job. That's how he was like putting himself through school. That's how he's like paying his bills, was in the comic books and Super Friends. But it wasn't the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, where he somehow gets teamed up with Firestar and Iceman. He was paying his bills with like taking pictures. So it was a very integral part of who he was. It wasn't just this sort of like secondary thing. And I don't know if you play video games at all, Leighton. There is a
every once in a while.
There's a video game. It's a zombie video game called Dead Rising. And there's a character called Frank West. He's the main character, and he gets.
I know Frank West, the guy with the camera that looks like the dude off of
GTA. He looks like a GTA guy, kind of like in the early.
I was about to say the guy off of the Walking Dead with the bat.
He looks like Negan. Yeah. He looks like
Negan, but
because he does have a bat with barbed wire on it.
Now I've seen so the only time I see like those kind of games was when they would have the commercials, and I don't know if they still do commercials for those games anymore. But I would and I recognize the guy Frank West because of the game, but I don't play the game, so I don't know if the camera had anything
part
to do
of the game. It's actually part of the game. Was he's a conflict photographer. They brought him in to like get pictures of what's like this zombie outbreak, and he's in there like taking pictures so that to prove that something was going on. And a big part of the gameplay was for him to actually get pictures and proof of what was happening. So you actually had to get to places and use the camera and take photos of what was going on. So that is something that is so integral. It's not sort of I'm trying to think of the word. Like it's like tangential part of who the character is. It's just like, oh, they happen to be a photographer, and this other thing is going on, and that thing is like what's sort of driving the action. And we have to find a reason for them to be here. Oh, they're a photographer, and they're taking pictures of things.
All right.
In Dead Rising, it was like taking the pictures was an integral part of the gameplay. It wasn't just like some sort of secondary thing. Like, if you ever play any of the like the Forza Horizon racing games, you can take pictures.
The camera. Did the camera give you any kind of special powers and or abilities to where, hey, if you took a picture of a hey, I can blast a zombie with 1600 watt seconds of light, and it vaporized them. You know what I mean? It allowed me to get away.
I happen to have he brings all of his pro photo strobes with him and blinds all the zombies. No, that's not he's taking pictures to document what's going on, and you have to get like the mission that you're sort of given in the game of like capturing certain things. You have to make sure that you get photographic evidence of it, or else you can't continue. Yeah.
So for the record, if anybody that creates that game is listening to this and they come out with another version of it, and that just happens to be one of the plays, I expect my royalties and NFTs. Thank you.
Yeah, NFTs. There was another video game called Beyond Good and Evil, and the character's name was Jade, and she owned her own photojournalism company. It's like this futuristic, like science fiction thing, like different worlds and planets, whatever. And she's like fighting against this, like corporation and elite military organization. But she is a similar thing where you had to take pictures to complete the missions. You had to like get photographic evidence and then, to prove what was actually happening. And I think that's like one of those things that makes those characters a little more interesting. And like in doing this, those characters like Frank West did like stuck it out and like, only got beat by, I think like Sean O'Connell or Peter Parker. But like there were like rabid Frank West fans on Twitter who were just like, no, Frank West, like how's this ranking? How's he only ranked an 8 seed in this? So I was like, dude, it's pretty random how I set this up. It's not like official rankings here.
See that's the, and I think that's the reason why, like I said, I think because I saw Jade on there and I saw Frank West and I knew him from the commercials. I've never seen Jade the commercials, so I had to Google her and say like, oh, okay, I can't vote for her. I think she went against originally. Who did she go against? Was it not Julia Roberts? Who did she go against?
That's right.
It was somebody that was very unfair for her to go against. Like, you should have put her against Frank West.
Well, that still would have been unfair. She was against Robert Kincaid from Bridges of Madison County. So that's kind of unfair. I mean, like, she'll come back. She'll be one of those characters.
That's like putting UCLA against. That's like putting UCLA against Michigan. Oh, my bad.
I'm not a U of M fan. Or Michigan State. It's we're fine. It's like Ball State. Let's say UCLA against Ball State. It's unfortunate. So we'll come back to this next year, and I think now you've mentioned you got some other people in my head. I'm definitely gonna think of what's his name? Is his name Charlie in the Conspiracy Theory? Mel Gibson's character. I think his name is Charlie.
Jerry is it Jerry? No, Jerry. Jerry. I think it's Jerry, like Jerry Fletcher or something like that. And you know who else I want in there? Which is a what's the word I'm looking for? It is a when it's like it's not really a photographer, a fictional photographer, but is the emoji, the photographer emoji of the smiley face taking a picture or whatever.
Well, I've never seen
right
this.
there. Yeah, it's like a smile. It's like the just like a happy face emoji, and it's taking a picture. Like Yahoo Messenger used to have one in there.
Oh yes,
and
yes,
all the time.
I'm gonna find it. Emoji. Like, yes, I remember what you're talking about. I'm just like, I haven't seen one recently because every time I search for like a camera emoji, it's just a camera or a camera with a flash or a movie camera.
Because it's like when you go to like a theme park and they want to tell you which where to take pictures at, they always have that emoji like, hey, here's a great spot, whatever, scenic spot.
Yes. Like, especially if you're like at Disney, they do it at Disney all the time. That's and there it is. I got it. I found it. There's a bunch of them. Damn. There's like they'll definitely be in there next time.
There's one that's there because I want to count like not Disney. I'm pretty sure there's probably a Mickey Mouse somewhere or a Goofy that has a camera or whatever, and we wouldn't necessarily consider Mickey Mouse to be a photographer any more than you would consider not Darkwing Duck. What is the is it Howard? No, who's Roger Rabbit?
Roger Rabbit. What's his name in Roger Rabbit? Bob Hoskins' character. He is.
But yeah, there's so many out there. Though, so it's just interesting, like how we come back. So I expect to see some stiffer competition next year.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it really there's. I learned a lot from running that March Madness this year. I think it'll be a lot different next year, and I will set it up differently and definitely have there'll be stiffer competition, and I might the rankings may be a little bit more maybe accurate and stuff. So Leighton, thank you for being on. We'll have to have you come back and talk about NFTs maybe sometime soon.
Anytime. Always a pleasure being on the Nerdy Photographer podcast. Nerdy Photographer podcast. Say that like 87 times fast.
Dude, I recorded an episode for 10 tips and tactics for tack sharp photos.
You're a fan of alliteration, I see.
Slightly, a little bit. Thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on.
All right, thanks.
Hey, listeners, are you looking for a way to support the Nerdy Photographer or just show off your love for photography? Head over to nerdyphotographer.com and go to the merchandise section of our shop. That's right. There's merchandise. There's funny t-shirts, wall art with inspirational photography quotes, mugs for people who drink things, stickers. You take them and you stick them to other things. The kids love these. Gonna be huge. So head over to nerdyphotographer.com, click on the shop, and head to the merchandise section to get yours today. Merchandising, merchandising, merchandising.
Hey, and now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
Hey, listeners, I forgot to bring up useless information with Leighton, so I have 2 tidbits for you that actually come from this episode. The first is the camera used by Jimmy Stewart in Rear Window was not a Nikon, like I had mistakenly said. It's actually an Exacta VX, also known as a Varex. And he was using a 400 millimeter lens to look into the apartments of his neighbors. The other piece of useless information is the first instance that I can find, and I can't find anything to like absolutely prove this is true, of product placement of a camera in a movie is, drum roll please, a Rolleiflex camera used by Sean Connery as James Bond 007 in the movie From Russia with Love in 1963. So there you go. That's your useless information for this episode. Welcome back. I would like to thank...
Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle of something right now, Fib.
Yes. Go on. Don't let me bother you. I will just observe and take notes.
Making me a little nervous here, but okay. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and want to get more entertaining photography podcast episodes, subscribe. If there's a topic that you would like to hear about, reach out via social media. You can find The Nerdy Photographer on Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit at The Nerdy Photo. I would like to thank Leighton DaCosta for being with us once again. You should check out Leighton's work at LeightonD.com. That's LeightonD.com. And on Instagram at LeightonDPhoto.
Is now a good time for questions?
Sure, I guess so.
Do you recall waking up this morning? And if so, what is the first thing you remember doing?
What kind of a question is that? Of course That's odd. I have to think about that for a second. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.